Salt behind her smile, secrets in the lazarette. Yachts don't sleep, they hum. After guests wander off to their suites smelling like sun and champagne, and the deck team coils the last line with that quiet priestliness only sailors have, the whole boat changes languages. Daytime talks in laughter over teak and ice clattering in cut crystal. Night talks in amperage and coolant loops, shaft bearings and bilge alarms. The Maritron screen in my cabin breathes green numbers. The Atlas converter purrs to itself, taking shore power and turning it into something the boat can love. In the engine room, the mans tick as they cool. The sea recovery water maker does small arithmetic with salt. If you've never stood next to a humming generator at 2 in the morning while your shirt tastes like diesel and victory, you don't know how loud competence can be. I'm Miles, chief engineer on a 62-meter white lie named Ariadne. My keys are a ring that could anchor a minor god. My radio says my name like a polite emergency. I can tell which deckhand is crossing the bridge deck by the rhythm of the scuppers under the hose. I know when the port stabilizer is sulking by the way the PLC panel tenses, and I can hear a fuel filter ask for mercy over the noise of the gyro. I live where heat lives and sleep when the boat lets me. My wife, then, was Alina. She designs evenings for people who think money can decree weather. She calls herself an experienced architect because calling it seduction would be impolite to donors. She knows which napkin fold will make a stranger think of their first kiss and where to put a sprig of rosemary so a billionaire believes he's rustic. She can make a sky look on purpose. We married on a Wednesday because we like stealing important things from the middle of the week. City Hall, a clerk with a hat like a rule, a white blazer with pockets deep enough to hide a compass. We signed, we laughed. We split a canned espresso on the steps and kissed around the aluminum rim. She said I tasted like static and tide. When our schedules overlapped, she'd cut through the crew mess like it was a stage door, skirt slung casual over tanned legs, the smell of bergamot and sunblock following like a rumor. She'd perch on the stainless counter and hook 2 fingers in my belt. I'd set my mouth at the warm notch beside her throat, the place where voice rehearses, and breathe until the static in her shoulders became whether I could navigate. She liked to throw a calf across my lap like punctuation. I liked to believe we were the sort of people who could do this job and keep our soft parts. The boat smiled at our hubris, then got back to humming. The first odd thing arrived wearing boredom. On my Maritron, the aft passerelle logged a short extension at 01:13, then retract, 5 seconds, just enough for a ghost to step aboard or ashore. The David over the beach club coughed a fractional amp spike as if someone leaned on its hand control. In the owner's suite, the minibar's load cell made a shy confession. Weight down by less than a half bottle, back up again. On the stern cam, a sliver of horizon moved in a way only a hull does when a tender kisses it too gently to admit. Nothing I could write anybody up for. Enough to make my shoulders adjust the angle they hold my life. 2 nights later, the same 5-second flirtation with air. The lazarette door contact blinked bypass. 2 seconds, virtue restored. The gyros did a tiny correction as if the boat had sighed. Someone had walked on the teak like they were telling it a secret. I'm not a detective. I'm a mechanic. But mechanics believe in residue. I took a little jar from the ETO's locker, the breath-thin UV powder we keep for OSHA theater, and rubbed a whisper under the passerelle handrail, a dusting around the lazarette hatch dog where no guest should ever put hands, a ghost along the tender David pendant line. I brushed a kiss of it on the underside of the minibar shelf in the owner's salon, where only a thoughtless hand would steady itself. That night the wind went asleep early. The hull talked to the dock in rubber size. A gull argued with its own ethics over a scrap and lost. Alina had a charity charter to dress. lanterns that told the breeze how to behave, linen that made money look inevitable. She slid past the pantry door and stole a grape from the chef like it owed her money. Later, when the last donor folded into bed with the practiced dignity of rich fatigue, she found me in the galley. "Your boat sounds smug," she murmured, stealing my mouth the way she steals spoons from the pass. "Smug is better than nervous," I said into her wrist. "What is it?" she asked. She knows the taste of my attention. "The passerelle is practicing bad habits," I said, and tried to make it flirt. There's a tilt to her head that precedes honesty by the length of a heartbeat. I slid my hand to the side of her throat. Not pressure, never pressure, just the hello my hand knows how to say. Something in her storm loosened, like a mooring line paying out on purpose. "Miles," she said, and the building hum listened in. "We should talk." We didn't write an open treaty like people in think pieces with better intentions than stamina. We made a smaller pact in the crew corridor eating cold pizza. We tell the truth before anyone else does. We keep the boat sacred. We do not bring our worst appetites into the lazarette. "If you want more than me," I said, surprising myself with the gentleness in it, "you tell me before the passerelle learns your name." She nodded and put her forehead to mine, and we stood like that, two grown people pretending a vow could be a cleat. In the morning my UV said the quiet part out loud. A shy green crescent glowed under the passerelle handrail. The lazarette dog sang to me where a hand had kissed it. The tender pendant line wore a smear like ambition. In the owner's salon, under the shelf, a thumbprint had a mouth. I could have swallowed it. I know how to swallow worse. But the sea breeds superstition and devotion in the same room. The lazarette is my chapel. I went down to it like a man asking God for a clue and found a hairpin on the teak. Not Alina's tortoiseshell, but a cheap silver thing trying to be a star. I picked it up with the same careful fingers I use on cotter pins and stayed down there longer than the air is kind. The other man's name arrived with a guest list and a smile. Our charterer's best friend had brought along a mascot for attention, Rafe Dumas, a freediver with a feed full of lungs and egos. He photographs like debt and laughs like a man who expects the ocean will blink first. Up close he is professionally polite. He shook my hand on the swim platform, eyes already scanning the horizon for something to conquer. "You keep a quiet yacht," he said. "She listens," I said, "because I don't owe strangers the truth." I didn't ask Alina in the galley or the crew mess or anywhere Steele could remember my voice. I asked her on land, on the quay where cement tells the truth poorly and gulls major in mockery. "Is there something you want more than me that you forgot to tell me about before the passerelle did?" I tried to make it a joke. My mouth failed its audition. She looked like a woman who has learned to cost out her own desires in advance. "I wanted to be wanted," she said, "by someone who doesn't know I can ballast a room." She said his name and didn't make it smaller. "It wasn't in the lazarette," she added too quickly, as if that somehow honored my church. "We said the boat is sacred," I said, and hated the way the word we tried to plead. "I won't bring it below decks," she said. She did not ask for absolution. She did not perform remorse for my benefit. I loved her more right then than any neat version of us would have allowed. We tried for a while. We made the bed on purpose. We ate sitting down. We did our jobs better than most people's best days. She kept her promise to the lazarette. I pretended the UV powder had retired. At night, I put my hand at her throat and breathed there and counted breaths like they were currency for a country I still belonged to. We ferried nights like gentle contraband across mornings. The tender purred like an accomplice. Then the engine room door contact, a thing that never lies, logged a 3-second bypass at 0203, the sort of hiccup only an idiot or a person in love would risk. On the heat exchanger cover, there was a smear of something dark and glossy that did not originate from any machine I own. On the shelf by my spares, a glass I didn't remember leaving had the memory of a lip at its rim. I cleaned it until my rag learned new words. We separated the way professionals do, with calendars and kindness. She took the kettle that complains before it sings. I kept the chipped mug that forgives my rack hours. On the dock we stood like men stand when they think they should shake hands but their bodies have other ideas. "Hate me clean," she said. "If you can't, at least don't make it your hobby." "I'll keep it in labeled bins," I said, and earned a small laugh, the kind that made the boat feel like forgiving us. Work forgave me faster than I forgave myself. The day tanks wanted bleeding. The alpha laval separator decided to be enigmatic. A raw water pump wept itself into a tantrum, and I gave it the attention it needed like men do with machines because we're better at that than we should be. Guests asked for the impossible and deck made it look like physics had cable ties. We did a small ocean crossing and no one puked. The gyro sang. The jibes behaved. The boat remembered she was built by smart hands. Arden came into focus the way a horizon does, gradually and then unarguable. She's our bosun and the sort of woman lines respect. Her hair is always in a braid that can take a wave. She smells like salt and sunscreen and chafe guard. She ties a bowline with one hand when showing off and pretends she doesn't show off. She talks to fenders like they're stubborn dogs and they sit. When she laughs, the teak looks warmer. We met properly in the bosun's locker where rib tubes go to sulk. A snap shackle had opinions. She had a Leatherman and a look that said I invent solutions for a living. "She's stuck because she knows you're watching," she said, then thumbed the quick release and it apologized. She looked at me like I was a problem worth effort. "You listen to the boat breathe," she said. It wasn't a question. "That's the job," I said. "That and translating other people's emergencies into torque specs." We kissed for the first time behind the fender board at midnight while a marina's sodium lights made the water look like money. It wasn't fireworks. It was pressure relief. She set her palm on my chest like she was checking that I'd stayed where the boat put me. I put my mouth at the base of her throat and breathed there, and she made a small sound that had nothing to do with being seen and everything to do with being held. Her eyes stayed open when she shivered, not distrust, just delight at the fact that the world didn't fall. We stopped when we should, because adults with jobs do not let yes become grievance. We stood forehead to forehead and laughed like sinners who would clean up after themselves. With Arden, precision was foreplay. She warmed under my hand when my thumb rested on the artery at her wrist, steady on purpose. She climbed into my lap in the silent crew mess at 0300 like a person testing a David's safe working load. Trust first, then move. We ignored guest spaces because sanctuaries deserve to be kept. We used the laundry when the dryers drowned discretion. We used the dark side of the tender bay where the air tastes like rubber and tide. Consent wasn't a contract we signed once. It was a craft we practiced until both our bodies agreed. If you're waiting for revenge, I am a dull tool. I could have given the owner a reason to feel like a sheriff, compiled time stamps, and powdered glows into a reel that would make a man like Rafe lose a contract and a tan. I could have told the charter broker, who would have told the client, who would have told the city, the way gossip loves to be a storm. But the lazarette is a church. I won't weaponize my gods. Anyway, Arden likes it when I come to her smelling of decency under diesel. That's better than winning. Elena and I learned to be human near each other. She kept our season contract because she's excellent, and I'm not petty enough to torch a deck over my pride. We texted like border towns sharing a river. She sent a photo of Basil bullying a sill. I replied with a picture of the generator room after I'd polished everything that didn't move and half of what did. She wrote, "Proud of you," and I let the words land without telling them they were late. Rafe stayed beautiful and buoyant. I saw him once on the quay. He tipped 2 fingers like a man who thinks gestures are currency and said, "You keep a clean wake." "That's the boat," I said. "I just take messages." The boat kept being herself. We crossed a patch of sloppy seas, and she handled it like a woman who knows her heels. The captain taught the owner how to hold a helm for 3 minutes without endangering anyone's will to live, and we applauded. The chef cried in dry stores after a soufflé collapsed, and then made the room forget by being better at his job a minute later. A deckhand split his knuckle on a fair lead, and I held the human parts together while he remembered he had bones. We made the dock in a crosswind, and the wind forgave us for being competent. Sometimes I still wake at an hour that doesn't deserve a name, in my tiny cabin that smells like clean marine and old jokes. If Arden's calf is thrown over my thigh like punctuation, I put my palm where her voice begins and wait for the small lift that tells me what the night needs. The difference between ending and completion has a temperature. My hand knows it now. My mouth is learning. Months after the powder went sulk into its jar, we hosted a fundraiser for a reef in a bay that has every right to be angrier than it is. Lanterns, small plates, stupid dresses. Alina made a room happen on the aft deck that convinced money it could be good. She wore black and the kind of smile that doesn't brag. Her hair was shorter. Her laugh had put something down. "Is she kind?" she asked without saying Arden's name because we were still careful with proper nouns. "She's specific," I said. "Specific is the only kindness that survives a season." "Be good to each other," she said. It wasn't a benediction. It was a maintenance schedule from a woman who builds ceilings that don't fall. We clinked water. Water never lies. Across the deck, Rafe told a joke he could afford and was forgiven for. He can keep his forgiveness. I had a different jurisdiction, a lazarette that trusts me and a woman who reads lines like weather. The boat kept being a boat. The passerelle minded itself. The tender glanced off and on without making a poem of it. The maritron glowed its steady little catechism. I made a last round through the engine room. The man slept like trained animals. I ran my knuckles over a guard rail the way you pet a dog who's done a good day. "Bilge's clear," I told the air, which is another way of telling my chest. "Tank's happy, Atlas purring, we're good." Back in my cabin, Arden was a dark shape made of trust and mistakes worth having. I slid in, set my mouth in the place where her neck admits its softness, and breathed like a man who knows which rooms are sacred and which are only expensive. She made that small noise that makes laws right themselves and threw her calf over my thigh. We didn't talk about powder or passerelles, or what a man will do with his shame when he thinks he can make something out of it. We just did the maintenance, stabilize, then repair, test, then touch, keep records, not grudges, do the job. In the morning, the boat would want coffee and diesel, and for me to beg the starboard genset to stop pretending it had feelings. A charter broker would call and say a client's child needed a unicorn, and then decide a jet ski with a bow would do. The captain would ask for impossibility in a tone that suggests he had already apologized in his heart. The teak would get hot, and I'd miss shade like a lover. The lazarette would smell like rubber and religion. If the passerelle ever blinked 5 seconds again, I'd notice. I'd decide whether to reach for the UV or the person I've become since I put the UV away. Lately, I put my palm against the warm steel of the door, breathe like a man who trusts his boat, and whisper the only truth a hull understands. "I've got you." Then I climb the ladder to the deck and the day, where a woman is coiling line like a sermon and grinning at me like whether I want to be out in, and the sea waits, as patient as forgiveness, for us to get on with it.